I thought, like, why am I just doing it myself? Dad, tax agents, I did a deal with Dad, old next work, and away we go. And I realized that I hadn't done a tax work in like 10 years at this stage. But I knew this company in this GPS. And around this time, I'd started a podcast that was, I was probably a podcast for the accounting industry called From the Trenches. It was sort of, accountants don't always put their opinions loud and out into the world.
Welcome to GrowthPulse, the B2B sales podcast. You might be a salesperson. You could lead a sales team. Maybe you run a business or you're a battle-tested entrepreneur. Then we built this podcast for you. Great salespeople are built, not born. We learn so much from the deals we win, but we learn even more from the deals we lose. In each episode, we bring you some of the world's leading salespeople, sales leaders, and experts in sales tech to share their best lessons from both their wins and their losses. Before we start, please check out the screen of your phone or laptop, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you've clicked subscribe and press that like button down below. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, click the plus sign to follow so we can let you know when we publish each new episode. If you like the episode, drop us a comment with any questions about the show. We'd love to get to know our audience. Great businesses always feature world-class salespeople, and the best salespeople are always learning. So let's jump in.
Welcome everyone to another show of GrowthPulse, the B2B sales podcast. I'm Dan Bartels. It's been a while since we've done a show, so we've been a little bit remiss. So apologies to everyone out. And I've got to give a big shout out to Ben Turner, who I was on a metro train with the other day, and he gave me a prod and said, "Mate, when's the next show coming out? I can't wait to see the next one." Ben, mate, thank you so much for giving us the prod to get back on the mics. Simon, mate, it's been too long. How you been, buddy?
It's been months. I've been really well.
Months. Yeah.
Since we've done a podcast, I've started a new job, and I'm actually now working in Chatswood. So I live about 2 kilometers from where my office is. So it's a bit of a change, not crossing the bridge, but it's all good. Loving it. Absolutely. And we've got a great guest on today.
Absolutely, mate. Do you want to do an intro? Welcome on the show.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody to David Boyar, who I met probably July of last year when I joined the Access Group. David has a really interesting background, and I thought he'd be a fantastic guest for us today. He's pretty much done everything from being a CFO to running a business for CFOs. He's an accountant. He's been part of a startup. He's been acquired. He's a sales guy at heart, but he understands accounting, which is probably a rare breed. So David, welcome to the Growth Pulse podcast, mate. Lovely to have you on.
It's great to be here. And I figure if I'm the first guest after somebody stopped you in the street and said, "When's the next show?" then I like to think I'm here by popular demand.
100%, mate. Look, we're here by you. I mean, it's a little bit of popular demand, but we're excited to have you on the show, my friend. Absolutely.
Simon, listening to that intro, listening to a career sales guy intro in accounting makes me think that accountant's going to absolutely kill me for talking about sales. The last thing an accountant wants to talk about.
Actually, I'll jump right in. Aren't accountants salespeople at heart as well? Aren't we all salespeople?
No, they're service but heart. If the service is right, they're more than happy to engage and have a conversation.
I love it.
But they're not sales-led people. The sales part, controllable opportunities, demand generation, completely outside the mental understanding, ethical attitude and soul of an account.
Thank goodness for that.
I reckon that's a really good place for us to start, Dave, because look, my father's a lawyer, right? And I've always, as I've been engaged in looking at his business, and if I sit in a dentist chair and all these service professionals, and you think, hey, they've got to run these organizations, these businesses, they're trying to grow, they're trying to feed the family, et cetera. How do you think about growing a business when you're working for software companies? We think we're service focused, right? And we all talk about trust, and we build customer success organizations, et cetera, that are all meant to be focused on the outcomes for the customer. And I think there's this really hard balance for organizations to truly live that and walk that every day to, hey, how do I drive a growing organization? So, mate, I reckon that's a great place for us to start, which is like flip the lid for an organization that fundamentally and almost ethically believes it's about that service piece. How do you then think about growing the revenue stream of your business. And I leaned back into a story I was told many years ago about a grizzly old accountant that was a partner at a big practice, and the junior partners would come in and talk about, I've signed some new clients and I've got a whole bunch of bookings or billings to happen. And this grizzly old accountant would say, mate, I only really care about one thing, just cash out bank. And, because I could have done the work and I can have built it, but until the customers pay the invoice, it doesn't matter.
Well, and that explains why accountants don't care about things like pipeline and demand gen, because pipeline and demand gen are those early lead indicators, and it just doesn't matter. What they're more interested in is, Simon, what your accountant should be talking to you about. Simon, you just got a new role. Presumably you've had a change in your financial circumstances. Maybe you've had a few months where you weren't working in between roles. How's things? How's the family? And from there, a conversation ends up being about Simon's goals, his ambitions, where he wants to be in 10 years. And an accountant's approach to sales isn't thinking about sales. It's thinking about, what do I need to get this guy so that he can get to where he wants to be? And then the services come out, which is very different to a sales-led software company. Where we quite literally have we have 2 weekly sales meetings. So I promise you, accountants have daily stand-ups about what work we can get to the door. They don't have daily stand-ups talking about what opportunities do we have on the pipeline. And that's not to say that accounting firms don't grow. They do, and many of them want to. But they are also constrained by the fact that demand for account services far exceeds the number of accounting firms that we have. And unlike software or widgets or spacely sprockets, there's a limited amount of hours that can be delivered. So accountants have changed their business models to not necessarily sell by the hour, although that's a basis for working out how much things have cost. But they'll start to think about value clients get out of the advice that they get, and maybe start to change their revenue model according to that. It was interesting you made the comment, putting accountants, dentists, and lawyers in the same bucket. And I think that accountants are different. Dentists aren't selling services anymore. They are selling products. And we know this because the Medicare rebates. When you get your invoice from your dentist, it doesn't have a service on it. It's line items of service that are refunded government. And because of that, you will see dentists advertising a lot more than you see lawyers and doctors. Lawyers and accountants. For lawyers to advertise, I don't know. I remember in Better Call Saul, he advertised, and he was like the shame of the whole. But you'll see allied health advertise and spend a lot more on digital ads than you'll see lawyers and accountants.
So, David, just to get the audience on the same page, you haven't always been in software sales. Fairly recently, right? So tell us a little bit about your journey. Obviously, you've gone to university. You've clearly become a CFO relatively quickly in your career. Tell us a little bit about that journey. And then I want to, after you go through that, I want to talk to, because a lot of our audience are software sales professionals and they sell to your persona. So I'm just keen to understand where you've got to. How did you get here?
Without being too indulgent, it was a little like this. You have these key memories in your life that for some reason you remember that thing and not everything else around it, which is probably equally as important. That VCE results, it was 2000. So VCE results were printed in the Herald Sun, Gauge, and me and my friends went to 7-Eleven on Hawthorne Road in Caulfield, and we all got the papers and we all found out our results together. And the people who knew they weren't going to do well weren't there, but there were like a couple of hundred kids from our school there trying to get their results. And I got a pretty good mark, somewhere in the 90s, and I got a good enough marks to do whatever I wanted, and I wanted to do accounting. I wanted to do accounting because my father ran a great accounting practice, and he was at every school thing I ever did. He was every sports game I ever played badly. Despite how bad I was, he still came. And I thought, this is a great life, and I'd hear this about the clients, and I thought, this is going to be awesome. This is what I want to do. Immediately getting the results and downing a large Slurpee, we went to cricket nets, which I played and wasn't good at. And a mate of mine who now runs a very commercial sales company said, you got the gift of the gab. What are you wasting your time with accounting? And I remember the exchange particularly. His name's Mark Lieber Commercial. And I said, if I can talk 18, then I'll just spend my whole life talking. There's not going to be anything special about me. A lot of people can talk. You've got a certain personality type. You have to practice and hone the craft. You've got you've got it in you.
I think you got two other people on this podcast that are sort of nodding along with a chuckle.
Yeah, and you've probably got people in teams that you guys have led that just have that natural ability to talk, and you need to turn that into some sort of process and get it outcome oriented. And I just thought that if I can get some technical skill behind me, plus that natural thing I had, you sort of end up in this rare Venn diagram, being able to communicate complex things. And that's what the best CFOs do. And they get great engagement in their organizations, explain drivers, and they explain why that behavior led to financial outcome and what that outcome is. And I could just see that as something. So I did my accounting at Monash Uni. I became a chartered accountant. And, I was really good at talking to clients and I understood numbers really well, but I was really poor at preparing numbers because that isn't grind work. That's sausage factory work. It's a huge detail. And I was never great at it.
Mhm.
I used to joke at Moore Stevens, I'd be a great partner, a terrible manager. And in 2006, 2007, it's not like now where accountants are supposed to be talking to clients and having life conversations. So I was going to leave and the GFC hit and you didn't leave a good job, promising career when the GFC hit, you stuck it out. And went to work for NAB as a business banker. And that was great because I learned a lot about big organizations, strategies, checklists, workflows, flow lending. And I was the only, Simon's laughing because now I'm in a big company again and have my ups and downs with that. I just learned a lot about cash flow. I'm the accountant in the business banking center in Richmond in Melbourne. And lasted 3 years. And I really do say lasted because it was just too rigid for me. But I had a particular referral that came to me for a vertically integrated bedding manufacturer in post GFC Victoria. Like, there's just no way blending to that. Like Victorian manufacturers in like 2010, just reeling. No one was doing really well. And I looked at his balance sheet and I said, look, your numbers, you need to be at this level and then we'll be able to start lending to you. Your finances are a mess. I can't read this stuff and your historicals and nonsense. You can't. And I thought I'd done the right thing without saying no, to protect my referral. Come in. He comes back 6 months later and it's all done. 6 months.
Wow.
And I said, how'd you do this? He goes, I've got a virtual CFO. The hell's a virtual CFO? Yeah, do you want to meet him? So I went and met him. Turned out the guy was Julian Kersner. He and I went to school together. He was much older than me. Played a few of AFL as well. So a bit of a rock star amongst my schoolboy friends. And went and worked for them in their virtual CFO division. And that's where I sort of learned how to talk, how to do numbers, and that sort of setup. I went out and did it by myself and realized as a virtual CFO, I'm talking for a long time here, I'd reported out about 250 grand in compliance fees for my clients, plus the compliance load they already had. And I thought, why am I just doing it myself? Dad, tax agents, I did a deal with Dad, old max work, and away we go. And I realized that I hadn't done it tax work in like 10 years at this stage. But I knew this company in the GPS. And around this time, I'd started a podcast that was, it was probably a podcast for the accounting industry called From the Trenches. It was sort of, accountants don't always put their opinions loud and out into the world. You want to be the quiet, trusted source.
You don't seem to have that issue, David.
I don't. And that's why the podcast worked quite well with Paul Meisner, who also does not have that issue. And through that, I'd met a lot of people. And I'm sure you guys have met a lot of fantastic people on the show as well. That's one of, you get these communities of podcasts. It's awesome. And one of them was Timothy Munro, the founder of Change GPS. And I'd seen him at all these events. I said, mate, here's what I'm struggling with. I've got this lead, because I knew leads. I don't know what to talk to them about. Don't know how to price. I don't know what to do. Do you have templates and tools for me? Yeah, that's what we do. Just use it. And if you like it, just talk about it on your show. The best part about the podcast is we got free software. Anyway, I used it and I picked up a $30,000 client within 2 weeks. Holy crap, it's unbelievable. Called him up and said, what's the vision? He said, fly to my office in Brisbane, spend 2 days in my boardroom. Let's work it out. And the bit of the rest is history from that time.
Yeah. And you became the CEO at Change GPS. And tell me, as a person joining Change GPS, effectively a startup, going from, I guess, the structure and rigor that you had up to that point, joining a startup software company, how did that hit you?
Well, it was startup-ish.
Yep.
Meaning the company was Tim, and it had like a side product of Tim. He had his accounting firm that was spent most of his time on. And this was sort of his passion project. So being 10 years old, you had a reasonably mature product. And I think that's what whilst it was a startup, it had a growth focus.
Mhm.
It had dipped in the toe in sales reps every now and again. And it never really growed. It was sort of, a few firms in, a few firms out every year, just slowly investing in product and development. But certainly the org structure, it didn't have that growth SaaS. It definitely didn't have that culture, and I wanted that. So Tim said to me, Dave, just start off in sales. Just go show that you can get money in. And it's brilliant because you just learn so much. When you're having 8 hours of conversations with prospects, you find out what works in the product, what doesn't. You get it's just the ultimate case study for marketing. And I said to him at the time, all right, well, I'll go into sales. How many leads do you get a month? He goes, I don't know. I'll find out. And he comes back. I said, all right, well, I'll be in charge of marketing and sales then, please. Let's do the demand gen. And then COVID and the business, we decided we were going to help. And a lot of people forget in COVID, the way small business was saved was accountants got small businesses cash flow boost.
Yep.
And job seeker. It was the accountants who worked 15 hours a day, who would get legislation changed at 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Yeah.
And it was the accountants, and we're going to help the accountants. And we ended up with a webinar. The first webinar, we had 1,000 people, and we were like, oh, this is like a world record. This is unbelievable. And we built a big community out of that. And we grew through giving away a lot of free resources and help. It's a beautiful way to grow. I was doing 8 sales calls a day, 8 a day, plus all the follow-up late into the night. I remember Lexi, my wife, said to me, it's really hard. The kids are going to learn about it in the lockdowns in high school. They're going to do essays on it. And I'll say, Mum and Dad, what you were doing. I'll say, we help.
Nice.
And it's true. And a lot of people did. And we were one of those fortunate businesses that did well out of COVID. A lot didn't. And a lot of them are still trying to recover. And a lot of those lives are trying to be rebuilt still. And those families are recovering. Fortunately, we well. And, what was it like, Simon? We were growing so fast. Every 3 months, I was reviewing the org chart. And because you don't have this org chart to model yourself against, you can go online, like 1,000 org charts for fast growing. But every business is different. And every business has different strengths in their leaders. And so they need the functions that you palm off to the users. I became CEO. The first thing I had to do was I had to get out of 8 hours of demos. So we hired a sales guy first. And because we didn't know how to train a sales guy, we hired our head of sales at the time, the guy doing the demos, Leo DeMano. Leo worked for the ATO for 25 years and just had a big personality. And we thought, that's good. He'll be able to talk to accountants. We'll just teach him how to advise. Actually, over the years, I've realized it's much better to take a career salesperson and teach them accounting than do the other way around.
Absolutely.
So, it was all right, Simon. It was fun. It was like,
That's clear. And I think you said there. Well, sorry.
I was just going to say, there's some real lessons there. I think first and foremost, we always talk about it, always rabble on about it, but as a salesperson, you've got to get out of bed in the morning and love what you do. And it really sounded like you had a passion for it. So it meant the late nights became something you're prepared to do because you could see the outcome. And I think the other big one, and this is one of Dan's big messages for salespeople, is understand and empathize with your customer or your client. What are they going through? How do you help them? And I think you targeted your business and your sales pitch on what is it that my customer is going through? What are the pains they've got? What are the business outcomes they're looking to achieve? And you really honed your message on that, and it clearly resonated.
One of the big frustrations accountants have is when sales reps say, I used to be, I got out, and they looked, and honestly, it's the most disrespectful because you're basically saying, I'm better than this. But the accountant thinks you failed. You couldn't tough it out. You didn't have the attention. You didn't have the grit. You've gone to this thing where and the accountants generally respectfully look down or be suspicious about why, because you come up with these fanciful pipelines and we can see all the bullshit. They see it all. So for all the, I'll tell you a story. We did a turnaround job on a solar company. The government, as soon as the government funds something, there's always come in and we picked up one of these things, and the guy was in a tough situation. He'd borrowed money from his in-laws. He geared to the hill. I remember he was in our office one day. He had to call all his creditors to try to do a deal with the creditors. He had a photo of his family on his desk as a reminder of why he was really humiliating himself trying to get these deals. Had to get rid of this huge ego that he had, and had to get rid of it. And I came in as the CFO after the turnaround job, get the systems in, get it reporting really well and get some governance and controls in. The biggest problem they had was the sales reps would flat out lie about the jobs kept. And it was like flat out lying.
Wow.
And fortunately, we put a software called Unleashed, which Access Group now owns some.
Mhm.
And Unleashed let me see the stock levels in like 5 different warehouses live.
Mhm.
And the sales rep would come at me and say, "Oh, we can't sell it because the customer wanted this. We had that grand for a product. I'll do it because we don't have stock." Mate, I can see the stock level on me.
Wow.
And I enjoyed that integration, but that's some of the attitude that the finance professional has to the salesperson is, if you don't understand me and don't show me credibility, I'm going to assume you're like the liars. And I'm sure these are the bad actors, right? This isn't also accountant who is literally trained in professional skepticism.
Yep.
It's a unit in the chartered accounting program.
Mhm.
That's the attitude they take. And I think in general, like I think about the cold emails that I get on LinkedIn or cold, anyone who's gone to an effort to understand what I might be going through that isn't generic to even know.
Mhm.
And, when we started this, Dan, you said to me, this is just like a couple of guys having a chat in a bar. Like Australians buy off people that they feel like they can just have a conversation
100%.
with.
Absolutely. I think in that day, the thing you just drilled into, which I'm fervent about, I think there's some detail behind here that I kind of want to drill into, right? There's 2 pieces I want to discuss really quickly. So one is, I don't think most salespeople fundamentally understand what a forecast is. And the term forecast is used in a couple of different lenses. So when you're a sales leader or you're a salesperson and you're talking to your leader, whether that's your CEO, your CRO, your regional leader, your sales manager, or it could be in a small business that the person who owns the purse strings is actually the finance manager or the CFO, right?
Mm.
You've got a sales forecast. And unfortunately, lots of salespeople they typically have one of these 2 lenses. And it's hard. One of these 2 personas. They either have what I call happy ears. I've talked to a guy, or he replied on LinkedIn. I'm putting him in my commit. That's probably an exaggeration, but get that piece right, which is I've got this. I've talked to someone about a product. I think it's a great fit for them. I haven't uncovered anything that might actually solve an issue for them. I haven't understood their scenario. Is it in their level of priority? I don't have any idea of that, but I've got a number now. Or they're at the other side of the equation, which is until a customer has fundamentally said, I'm going to buy it. I've already fallen on the pen and signed the piece of paper. God forbid, can't tell the CFO or my boss that it's going to sign because no way, it's not going to happen, right? That's the sales forecast side. But then a business has got another side of the operating motion, which is like your finance or your cash flow forecast you need to operate under. And there's a whole bunch of different measures. So a CFO's got to look at this and say, and again, mate, tell me if I'm wrong here, right? Because you're the accountant, I'm not. I did study finance at university. That was back in the Pleistocene age. But I'm going to take this ongoing conversation that I'm having through my sales team to my customers. And I'm going to look at the size of the forecast and try and put some filters on it, try and get an understanding of what's likely to happen in the future. And it's always future predicting. I'm trying to see what's going to be. Again, I'm looking at my cash flow forecast and I'm going to use some historical measures and understand what might happen. So can I pay people? Can I buy more stock? What are the things going to happen in my business? But as a salesperson, when you aren't presenting the reality of what's happening in your CRM, track it in a spreadsheet for all I care, right? But put it in something that is trackable, comparable, and so that all of the engagements and conversations you're having, you actually have an understanding of how they vary. Because that's what an accountant is looking for. Like, how much do they vary from what I know most of our customers have done in the past that end up at $1? Okay, now I've got a percentage and I can work out how will I give that a 50 cents. The other one I'll give 20 cents. And now I've got some sort of stability under what my future cash flow forecasts are. But if you're not being truthful, then that becomes problematic. And I've said, Simon and I have worked together for a long time, and I've said this to my sales guys many, many times. I prefer to know the number 0. Like, it's genuinely 0. than you like.
Oh, Simon, put 0 in the commit meeting we've got this afternoon. Let me know how it goes.
But if the number says it's 0, okay, if I fundamentally know in this time period, this month, this day, this week, this month,
True.
this quarter, the number's actually 0. Okay, it's not great. Like, it's a problem, but I know what the problem is and I can manage around that, and I can give you more resources. I can train you more. I don't go and hire more people. I might can that marketing program that we were going to, I might push it back a quarter. Whatever it is, that's way better than all of my deals are definitely coming in and then none of them come in. I think that piece is critically important.
Yeah. Look, I've got a long answer.
Please,
Sorry,
yeah,
everyone.
we want to, that's what we're here for. Let's talk about it.
Everything you just spoke about, you spoke about it as if they're different motions, but it is one motion. It's actually one workflow. And it starts with a customer out in the world has no idea they have a need and doesn't there's a solution. And it ends with tax paid on the cash in the bank. Not cash in the bank, tax paid. Because the cash in the banks might be nice, but 30% of it's the tax officers. So don't go spend it on your jet ski and your Bali holiday and your kitchen reno and your fancy Gucci handbag or whatever it is you want to spend your money on.
Or your fancy podcast equipment.
Or your fancy podcast equipment. You know what? You spend money on your fancy podcast equipment when you got an audience and people are paying you for your shit. Otherwise, honestly, your mobile phone's got the best mic you're probably going to get access to. So it's one motion. And what happens in small business, you can see the one motion. And in big business, because you need functions and you need managers, it gets siphoned off into sections. And so the person in their section can only really appreciate the drivers and the outcomes of their section. And I had a company where I was Mr. Everything before. Everything. I was in my Xero file twice a day. And I was in my HubSpot CRM for the other 5 hours. So the one motion working from the end backwards, because it starts with marketing. Sales is probably that next quadrant. So marketing would be the first quadrant, sales the next quadrant, delivery and operations the third, and finance and tax paid the fourth. So let's start at the fourth. Tax paid, right? Oh, the most accountants, experts at this. And you'll have an external accountant, very, very few businesses in Australia, internal tax teams. It's really only the biggest one, and corporates sometimes, but they'll still have external advisors. Well, did you know Australia, I think, is the 4th or 5th biggest market for consultants in the world?
Wow.
29 million people. So you start at finance, and then finance says, all right, I need to plan for the tax that I need to pay. So I need to work out what my profits can be. Well, how am I going to work out what my profits can be? Well, you think about it, what a P&L looks like. It's always revenue at the top, cost of goods sold, gives you net profit, overheads. Then you get net profit before tax, interest, EBIT, tax, and net profit after tax. That's the system. So the accountant says, all right, I need to come up with a revenue forecast. Hey, sales, give me a revenue. And then they go back up through those quadrants. Hey, sales, we're going to come up with a revenue forecast. We're going to look at this. And the sales guy, if it's big, will say, well, marketing, how many leads are you going to get me? And then you've got sales versus marketing stoush that can happen. And the CFO is going to look at it they're going to do two things, what's called a top down and a bottom up. And the top down is, well, the last 5 years, we've grown at 8% a year. So I'm going to expect, my default position is we're going to do 8% unless sales operation, something new and big is going to happen or something bad. And then you get events, you get a COVID, GFC, you get the Southeast Asian collapse that happened in the early 2000s. So that's outside this. So they'll keep going back up through the quadrants to get information to try to validate what's happened in the past. And the sales team, marketing might give me this many leads. I close at 25%. Plus I can hunt around and get this stuff. And that might be the annual budget. And then you got the monthly budget where they'll literally look and say, on my list, I've got 15 deals that 5 are going to close. Now that's my number. And I never used the word commit until I got to the Access Group.
Right.
The idea of, to me, the idea of doing weekly sales forecasts is crazy. We do it and understand why we need to do it. I don't think a sales rep sells because of it. I understand. So the CFO keeps going back through those quadrants, trying to get information to verify and validate what's going on. and they'll look at marketing and then they'll say, well, if marketing says they can generate this much, if I give marketing an extra % budget, am I going to get more out of it? And the CFO will have an urge to work out if that's real, because it's not. You get no utility for every dollar you spend on marketing sometimes. And then they come to the sales team, and the sales team will do that. What can I generate myself? What will marketing give me? But they'll also think about what my incentives are. And fundamentally, I reckon this is where organizations break it. Because you can have a sales team that has incentives that don't incentivize them to hit the plan that the CFO needs to. And it just creates nightmares. And I've seen this in small businesses, because the small business owner didn't want to tell the truth to their small team, because they didn't want the small team to think that maybe the business is in trouble. I've seen it in big organizations where communication is just hard. It's no one's fault. It just, you miss something. Bigger organizations complicate. So that's how I look at that CFO thing. And I think I've seen it that only way in big organizations is when everyone's incentives are lined up properly to get the outcomes that you need. And Simon's nodding and smiling furiously, because we've had to fix something in the last couple of months that we thought we were fine on. And then we was, no wonder that metric's not moving. No one's incentivized to move.
I want to ask you a question on that from an Australian accountant perspective, because there's a thing, I've done a fair bit of advice for some small businesses over the last kind of 5 or 10 years. And there's a behavior that I see in Australian businesses that, when we're talking about incentive plans and salespeople, that I don't see in North American businesses in particular. It's a desire to make sure that you've paid back the entirety of the salesperson's wage before you pay them any more money on incentives. And it's a very Australian point of view. And the way you just described it then, which is the fundamental basis of it's not incentivizing them to go and achieve the outcomes of what the business are after, is actually a much better way. I've had a look at it than I've actually seen. I've been trying to find a good answer as to how to tell Australian businesses. And I've seen models where it's, listen, I've got a plan. I want them to sell $1 million this year, but I'm paying them $150K as a base salary. So I don't really want to pay them any money till they get to kind of 800,000. So we've got to hit that number before they pay any more money. And I'm like, I get why you're doing it, but each dollar from zero is the behavior you're trying to drive. So how do you want, and there's this model where you go back to full circle, and Australian business, if I've hit the nail on the head in terms of the problem you guys have just gone and solved.
No, Dan, I love it. I love this because, and I'll set it up before David can answer. So I come from a background of big business, big software, North American, European, etc. David's come at this as a small business, as an accountant, and I think it's going to be an absolutely superb conversation. David, tell me about the incentive plans you had for your team prior to being acquired.
Well, the incentive plan was aligned to the strengths and weaknesses of the business. And the business, huge strength in marketing. Because of that COVID stuff, we got 3,000, 5,000 accountants on a web that would trigger a pipeline. Because we kept doing that empathy with the client that you eloquently explained. And so I thought that because marketing was such a strength and we really didn't struggle to get leads, like we have days, a dozen demos get booked in and sales reps come to the website. Right. And we don't spend any money on digital marketing. So I thought, if that's such a strength, I'm going to pay this sales rep 100, 120, 150, 80, what doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Big damn job, mate.
Yeah.
That was my attitude. That's your job. I've got a job. You've got a job. The product guys, if the product guys don't deliver, the sales guys can't sell us. Where does this idea of commissions come from?
And I think that's the bit I want to understand your point of view on.
So where does it come from? You don't have a tipping culture in Australia because you have minimum wages. And now I go to restaurants and I have to order my meal off a QR code and you ask me for a tip. There's literally no service. None. Get stuffed.
Yeah, I agree.
What a waste of my after-tax money to tip someone who walked food from a Bay Marie to my table. It's just absurd. And so maybe I don't know American sales things, but maybe it's the tipping culture and it's the percentage of effort. It's also Australia is maybe not the merit America might actually be. Like we have this there's this huge safety net in our tax system and our social system. We're all going to help you. And small businesses can't actually afford a lot of this stuff because people paid really, really, really well here. So that was my first strategy, but then based on that strength and why Simon was setting up. So because of that, I gave our incentives whether the sales team had a floor target. If you didn't hit your floor, you got $0. Partly because you were paid very well as a base. Like you were definitely paid enough.
And David, your sales guys they weren't on 50-50 plans, right? They were more 70-30. 70
I
base.
reckon it was it probably ended up as 80-20.
Yeah. So that's important in the context of this.
100%.
And you might say, well, how are you attracting good talent if you don't have that big comp structure? And the answer is they had so many good quality leads coming in, they could quite easily hit targets because they didn't have to spend their time doing LinkedIn research and it was just much easier to get it in. We also have only sell to public practice accountants. That's it. So once you know customer and that buying behavior, you don't have to mentally, it's actually an easy thing to do. So I think globally, we just high base rate in Australia that comes from decades of union negotiation, a whole social systems and that sort of stuff. But also I think the business incentive plan should not necessarily needs to relate to the strengths and weaknesses of the business. Then you go out and say, well, am I in a competitive labor market or am I not? And 2 years ago, we were in a competitive labor and we did have to do things that I was uncomfortable with to get the right people. We're not there yet. So we don't have to do that stuff, but worry about the market trends after you work out what you need in your business.
Yep. And then obviously going through the journey into being acquired, part of a bigger company, multinational, different incentive plans. You've obviously had to look at the existing incentive plans and new incentive plans. And I think the team you brought in, pretty happy with the change.
Most people like having their OTE doubled, mate.
Yep.
It's interesting because big company to run efficiently needs one commission plan for the whole.
Yep.
And as my CFO had on, 100%. I don't want to be managing all these different comm structures and you might have different incentives for different subdivisions that you've got because different products that they've got, different markets. That's fine. The actual structure of the commission needs to be the same. So in Access, there's no floor. If you sell something, you get money. But if you hit your target, that's shaded a little, depending on how you get against the targets. And then there's come in if you're a consistent performer and as you reward, best people get rewarded, the most consistent.
Absolutely.
I love. That's been an easy sell to sell is an organization when a lead comes in on a huge Salesforce database, who gets the lead? And that's been, a big challenge for Simon and I, and we've gone hard on one thing and come back and gone back again and seesawed all around it.
Yeah, Dan, it's interesting. I think coming from a big software company background, you look at a sales team and you look at your sales guys, you've got your enterprise, your mid-market, your small enterprise team. Typically, there's a volume of customers in that small enterprise, slightly less in mid and slightly less in large enterprise. And every salesperson has a territory in Salesforce. Leads come for somebody in your territory. You grab the lead and run. What's really interesting in David's business, before coming in here, it was because they knew their target market. So it's accounting practices in Australia. They didn't have territories. Sales territories. First time in my career I've seen that, but it worked really well. And I think the lesson there is you and I, Dan, come from big European or American software companies, and we think there's only one way to peel a banana. But honestly, I've been exposed to now some really different, interesting models, Australian-grown companies that do it completely differently. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think it's an interesting. You've got to build your sales team, your lead routing, your commission plans fit for purpose, right? So I think the lesson for me was certainly one size does not fit all. And because I come from a big American software background doesn't mean I'm correct. Absolutely not. And I think some of the stuff that small Australian businesses do would really benefit larger companies. I think both can learn from each other.
You might remember, Simon, a couple of years ago, we had a problem where we were, and look, typically the motion in larger, it's not just North American companies, like German companies do it, like the Israeli companies do it. I've got a massive list of all the companies I think I should be able to go and sell to, or just it's all the companies in Australia. Divide it up. Someone's got responsibility. Why do they do it? It's to avoid fights. It's to avoid the awkward conversation of, has someone got more leads or less leads or whatever else? And I think in that scenario, I'll go to the story that Simon and I sold a couple of years ago. I think we talked about it on the podcast before, but it's just to solve fights. Underneath that, okay, because where does the lead when it comes in, or who should you be focused on chasing, etc. Underneath that, it misses the point that I think as leaders, we've got to look at, whether you're a sales leader or a business leader, we've got to look at, lean back into a sporting analogy. And for those who understand the NRL, if you're Ivan Cleary running the Penrith Panthers at the moment, right? You've got a first string 5'8", you've got a second string 5'8" in the twos, and you've got some kid coming through in the juniors who's great in Jersey Flegg, right? You don't go to the Jersey Flegg kid a week out from the finals and say, listen, I've given everybody a good run, and I'm going to put you into the first for the finals and the grand final week because you haven't had much of a run. He says, I'm going to put the best team on the park to win the final. So we as salespeople, when you've had that model that says, I'm going to evenly divide and conquer and territories and match it all up, it's this model of saying the guy that's the underperformer gets exactly the same size territory as the top performer. It's not to your point about autocracies before, it's not about equality. A business is there to make money for the shareholders and the owners and the people that work there. If you want to get a better lead, be better, sell better, learn. And so underneath that, I think that the divide and conquer model is a little bit broken. But then underneath that, the expectation of salespeople that says, you know what, why does the rainmaker always get the rainmaker leads? Because he's the rainmaker, because he closes with them. He's better. And why do I pay him more money? Because he's better, right? Or he or she's better. They're better. But so that fundamental piece, I think, is broken. But a thing that Simon and I ran into a number of years ago, we were given this model the year before, all accounts divided up, blah, 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 off we go. We had reps that had like 600 leads in their territory. You've got 600 targeted accounts, not leads, targeted accounts you're going to go and sell to. It's only 52 weeks in a year. And you can take 4 weeks off at leave if you live in Australia. For North Americans, we get 4 weeks leave, too bad. You got 48 weeks. How are you possibly going to talk to 600 companies? Even if I've got a phenomenal marketing team and I've probably got 4 or 5 personas in each of those companies I'm going to go and talk to. So I'm now talking about 30,000, 3,000 possible, but you can't talk to them. It's not going to happen. So you filter it back and you go, I'm not going to touch 80% of this territory. I'm going to focus on 10 or 15% of it. And even in that group, you're not going to get to them all. So we actually went through and went, right, our territories aren't 400. They're like 20. We had the best year ever that company had by just getting the team to focus on 20 odd leads. And we closed more business in the next financial year up by 2 or 3. I think it was like 2.5x than the previous year by just saying, bring your focus down. Yeah. I think the example you got before, Dave, get really focused on outcomes for customers. What's the problem you're solving over there? Don't get too worried about the deal size. You're solving great problems for customers. They will invest in it because they know they're going to have to spend money to get good outcomes. They want good support. They want good consulting. They want good delivery. They will spend money to get good outcomes. And that was what we delivered. But I think to your point, Simon, it's like the broken North American model of everybody's got an assignment, every customer's there. And look, interestingly, some consulting I've done over the last little period, I think that model is being broken as well, even by the big North American companies. They're filtering back and saying, let's get focused on customers that we can actually service properly. Yeah, you were from
like, it's just someone, I don't want to share my true thought about people who pay my wage these days. There's no reason why someone in person to close a deal in Barangaroo. I have no idea what you just said about rugby. That lead is a passionate Penrith. And I'm the wrong person to about sport. If they're a Sydney Swans fan, I will talk about the time Dale Morris tackled back in the 2016 grand final, John Long in grand finals, and delivering unended happiness to my family. Now, it's hard to get a CRM that's that good that those talking points in those relationships.
Yep.
But what you guys spoke about is like the glory days, BDMing and long lunches and corporate credit cards and local relationships. And leads come in on an internet website now. They're routed through advanced CRMs. Sales calls are done on Teams.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be this big giant global and then say, but you can only sell to these postcodes.
Yeah,
It's like,
doesn't work either.
It's not passing a pub test.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at NAB, would run a big campaign and the leads would come in and it was always the best leads. And I complained because why wouldn't?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, you mishandled the last two that we gave you. And like, what a great lesson for me.
Mm-hmm.
What a brilliant lesson. And so I think part of the answer is a sales leader or manager who's strong enough to say to someone, you did a good job here. And then you sort the wheat from the chaff, because then that sales rep will get their act together and say, right, what would I have done differently? Performance change. And then the other ones will do the petty crap and you realize they're half a door because you managed them the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, it's easy for us to channel a podcast. What I'm learning, big organizations are really hard to change. Despite all of the desire and efforts of the leadership, there is so many reasons why it can't move 1 degree to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, and I've said this to Simon, I got myself in trouble. Don't worry about moving 1 degree, make a big move 30%, and but then it introduced risk into an operating model, and I don't want to do that.
Yep. But we take them on the journey, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We do. And also, Simon, it's not, when you talk about the sales motion that we had before, we didn't have territories. The level down we did. So the success managers had members that they looked after.
Yes.
And our success managers had upgrade and churn downsell targets. So it was a really hard role. Had to watch both ways. And we could just see we were doing okay, but we regularly miss upsell numbers because they can. And what I do like about what Access has done is they're separate divisions, separate skills, separate career paths. And now we need to work out how to make sure we're going to have to start introducing patches into Change GPS.
I think what worked really well with what Dan was describing is we would give somebody 20 new business patch. Once they'd churned through that and we could see that they'd put the effort and they'd spoken to everybody, the right engagement had happened, we'd give them another 20. And so they were constantly burning through rather than a list of 500 that they just scratch their heads and I'll start an A and finish at Z.
I think
it was real incentive.
Ash, our gun SDR will be throwing her cereal against the wall hearing this conversation, because we've got some automation in Salesforce at the moment. When something happens, she gets like 500 leads. She's like, Dave, can't handle this. Can you stop it? And I said, yeah, we'll get there, Ash, just not right now. And I tried to, she'll love that you've just said that, Simon. I'm sure you'll get a message very soon. Can
we have a conversation? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Dave, you mentioned something at the start of the conversation around you were the first salesperson and sort of owned that motion. And I think it's a really interesting lesson for lots of small business owners to understand. You see lots of small business owners, they get 6 months in and all of a sudden they haven't really got out there and cracked what their sales motion looks like. And then all of a sudden they need new revenue. I'm going to hire a sales guy. What were your lessons around actually having cut your teeth and understood the entire sales motion for the business before you kind of brought on that sales team? When you kind of look back at it, what do you think was much better as a result of having done that than that you probably wouldn't have known if you'd brought someone in much earlier?
So one thing I think that we hold them back and we train them and we teach them the systems. And the best thing you can do is just pick up the phone.
Yep.
So Aaron, our success manager, day one, we took him to an industry event, Brisbane convention. Marilia, day one, stuck her on the sand. Literally, day one in the office, we took them out and they met 100 customers. Scott, who's now head of sales, day one, we had an online event with 30 speakers and like 1,000 people attending a digital conference. I think it was just over COVID, so still doing digital stuff. We got him to MC a room. And the lesson in all of that is rush people, get in front of the customer.
Love it.
And we waste so much time on internal stuff.
That David, that reminds me of a story. I remember when I joined Financial Force, 2016. We're in a little serviced office, and I walked into the office, and we had one services guy, one sales guy, and one pre-sales guy. And I said, look, let's go visit a client. I think this is day 3, before you'd started, Dan, but not long before. And I said to our pre-sales guy, I've seen the top deal we've got. Let's go visit them. Let's go have a conversation. I get this panic look from our pre-sales guy at the time. And I said, what, are you nervous about seeing a client? And he goes, no, I'm not, but I'm not allowed to see clients yet. And the organization had this really rigid set of internal e-learning and process and everything before you actually got your pen license and you're allowed to go talk to the client. And I said, I threw him his jack and I said, fuck that. The most important thing is let's go talk to the client and actually understand what they're looking for. And we've obviously built a pretty good relationship since then. That was Adrian Heng. Back in the
story.
early days.
Yeah.
What was fascinating about it is I gave him the license to actually beg forgiveness rather than ask permission, first of all. But second one, his eyes lit up after we got him in front of the client. And good people in front of clients, that's what they live for. And you've obviously hired some great people, David, because just chatting to Scott, he's a lovely guy. He's hilarious. He's your Metallica sales guy, which I love. But he's at his happiest, not when he's talking to me or you, but when he's talking to a client.
I had a deep inference, and he literally said, "I just need this stuff resolved so it can all get out of my way."
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And in football,
that's it.
Don't
get in the ball
up the field.
Get in the ball.
Just get it somewhere near him and let him sell.
Yep.
And I just think we just get in our way.
Mm-hmm.
And my happiest days when I'm talking to people, I like strategy now a lot as I've sort of my skill sets expanded. I've got that. I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
I can strategize. What we did the last 2 days wasn't a lot of our members were already at that event, and I was pitching my strategy and practicing my pitch. And I got 20 people to tell me whether it was crap or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The value ends before we chuck it in an email and send it to 30,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all better for it.
That's awesome.
For sure.
Can I make one other comment
Please.
about salespeople?
As long as it's a good one.
I'll start off a bit negative, but it's all, you're all liars. Really gear myself to your audience.
David, you got to say that, mate. If that's the thinking, every salesperson that talks to a CFO is in the back of their mind to say, I need to come from the basic premise that I'm a liar.
He doesn't trust me.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
100%. So it's the concept of the profession. So I think that there are sales professionals and they're professional in their reliable, accurate, present well. But compared to accounting, sales, honest. And those attributes and those values you'd associate with professional, but sales is not a profession. And salespeople will often talk about being the profession of sales. A profession's a legal term. A profession has standards and rules and regulations. It has ethical behavior obligations, and it has disciplinary action when you don't comply. That's why you have PwC hold in front of a royal commission or a senate inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a statement of fact. So my advice to salespeople is don't carry on in front of an accountant as if you've got the same level of professional obligations. An accountant stuffs up. Their license is revoked. Their entire livelihood is taken away from them. Their status, their sense of self-worth. And maybe it's a benefit. The sales professional, the person who conducts themselves properly, never has that risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an important thing to understand when interacting between those two people. You can seriously be really professional. We've got some unbelievable professionals, Simon. None of them are going to lose. They might lose their job if they don't perform, but they won't lose their livelihood when their designation's stripped away from them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And that goes back to my comment about the dentists as well. The dentist is the professional.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They've got the same obligations.
I
just think that's an important obligation. If you recognize, don't put mayonnaise on it. Just it is what it is.
I think there's another point to that as well, though, David, which is if you want to be you're right. There is a level of education that anybody goes through to do any of those roles we talked about before, lawyer, dentist, accountant, et cetera, et cetera. And even after the education, you still have to get certified and have to maintain like continual education programs are part of every one of those certifications, right? You don't maintain them, you get kicked off the bar. You don't maintain them, you can't keep your practicing certificate, right? If you want to be a sales professional, what's your investment in continued education, the subject matter area? If you're in solar, if you're in technology, if you're in whatever, how do you stand toe to toe with an executive that you're selling to of whatever organization? And are you being that level professional? Yep. Show your craft. And I 100% agree with you. Look, I did an accounting, I did an economics degree. I've done an MBA. None of them make me a sales professional. They don't at all. But if my behavior does, and I can stand toe to toe in a room with a professional as you've defined it, and I agree with you, your point of view. If I've done those things and if I act in the way that those executives expect, that's the standard of profession. If I'm doing those things, I'm an equal. And trust is earned, it's not owed. And you can lose trust in a heartbeat, but it takes a long time to build. And once you've built it, you have to do the work to maintain it and continue to invest in it. And we've all been the victims of losing someone's trust in a business relationship. And you look back and you go, it could have been big, it could have been minor, and I've got to rebuild it again, right? And what did I do? What am I going to change in my behavior moving forward in order that person has confidence, that organization has confidence that they can rely on my advice, they can rely on my behavior as well.
And I'll share something very positive, Simon, and this is maybe a good example we can share across our team. Scott wakes up in the morning, reads the sports news, and then he reads Accountants Daily, and then he listens to all the industry podcasts, and then he asks me questions about the news, and then he jumps on Facebook, and then he goes into the accountant community Facebook groups to find what accountants are talking. That's someone who can confidently jump on a sales call. How about them Nicks, or whatever the equivalent.
Yeah.
And that to me is professional behavior. And you get your peer respect comes from stuff.
100% agree.
Well, Dave, listen, mate, we're getting to the top of the hour, and I know we've all got busy days ahead of us today. So, mate, definitely wanted to thank you for your time, Simon, as always. And we always end the show with a parting piece of advice, mate, whether it's something we've talked about already or just a piece of advice for our listeners and salespeople. What's one key nugget out of your career, or just?
I spent 10 grand on a sales training course when I had $23,000 in account. So you'll usually get a return on investing in yourself.
Yep.
Great point. Love it.
Great point.
Thanks, David.
100%. Thank you.
It's been awesome chatting to you today, mate. That's some really good insights. And I think what I love is you've been on both sides of the fence. You've built up a career as an accountant and a CFO. You've gone into sort of startup mode software. You've moved into a very large multinational software company. You've obviously had to change along the way, but boy, you've got some interesting insights. I think salespeople can learn from somebody that's done both sides of the fence. A lot of salespeople, sales is all they've ever done. I think the best salespeople I've ever worked with have always done something else. They've got something to reflect on. And I think if you're a salesperson that's career sales, the best advice I can give you is learn from people like David that have done not just sales, but they've done a whole bunch of other things because they've learned about the other side of the coin from a buying perspective. What do you look for in a salesperson? What do you expect? What sort of trust do you need to have built with a salesperson? And I love it, David. By default, you're a liar until you prove otherwise as a sales guy.
Awesome.
Title of the show.
Thanks everyone for listening. If you like the show, look, please drop us a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, please click subscribe and like down below. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, again, you press the plus button to make sure you get all of our upcoming episodes. And Simon and I are committing to do a few more this year than we did last year. So we look forward to talking to you guys all again soon. David, thank you so much for your time. Simon, thanks as always. Talk to everyone soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.